Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here and welcome to my guide to Zurvan Extreme, the final Extreme Primal in the Heavensward expansion pack. You'll need to first finish the Warring Triad side story for patch 3.5 before you can enter, including defeating him on the normal difficulty. He requires a minimum item level of 250 to enter in the Raid Finder and drops I-265 weapons, a mount, and crafting materials. Zurvan is broken up into 3 phases plus an add phase. To skip to a specific phase, please use the annotations in the top left hand of the video. Zurvan's Phase 1 begins with him stuck in the center of the room like a birthday cake. When the fight starts, all of his auto attacks will be large cleaves on his current aggro target, and he begins to destroy pieces of the arena. He will always destroy the east side first, followed by the north, and finally the west. If you're standing on a platform when it is destroyed, you will fall to your death. We have our tanks start on the north side of the arena, while all of the DPS and healers hang out on the south piece. This allows the tank to draw the cleaves away and makes it so the party doesn't ever need to move because of the destroyed pieces. Zurvan does target the remaining party members with fire AoEs, which I recommend stacking up and moving out of them with the space you have on the south platform. It's best if people stack to the far east side of the south platform and then move to the west to dodge, but I've seen so many groups just YOLO dodge this stuff that you're probably going to get more of the same in the party finder. After Zurvan has destroyed all but the south piece of the arena, he will break free, do some raid-wide damage, and drop you all to a platform to begin Phase 2. Phase 2's difficulty changes quite a bit if you're able to push Zurvan to 75% before his first mechanic. If you are able to, the fight is a lot easier. If not, well, it's not too bad, but it's just one extra thing to do. First of all, Zurvan now has normal auto attacks, but still cleave, so keep him facing away from the group. Also, the outside of the arena is covered in fire, so if you're knocked into the wall, you'll take about 10k damage per second from it. If you don't push him to 75%, Zurvan's first mechanic will be Soar. He will split and charge to 3 locations on the arena. After the first charge, Zurvan will hover at those locations while marking 6 of your party members with large fire AoEs. After a brief period, the AoEs will explode and leave behind fire puddles, while Zurvan himself charges directly across the arena from his current location. Luckily, Zurvan only has 2 set charge patterns that you can plan for, as shown in these diagrams. Set these locations up with your party beforehand and react to Soar locations, and you got this easy. After the AoEs and charges explode, Zurvan will mark one healer with a split damage AoE and the other healer with a red marker. The red marker healer should stay away from the group while everyone else groups up to split the rest of the damage. Keep in mind, if there are deaths, it may not end up on a healer, but if everyone's alive, that's where it's going to go. After 75% passes, which you should pass soon after Soar if you get it at all, Zurvan will go to the center of the room and place an ice puddle under him, slowing movement speed and dealing large damage to anyone who attempts to pass through it. He'll then cleave the tank 3 times before turning to a random party member and casting Biting Halberd. This attack does a 270 degree AoE knockback plus vulnerability stack, so when it starts casting, rotate around Zurvan and stack immediately behind him to avoid the attack. After Halberd, Zurvan will begin casting Southern Cross, which snapshots the current location of every party member when it finishes casting, before dropping a large ice AoE in that spot. We just stay stacked up for Southern Cross where we were for Biting Halberd, and as soon as it finishes casting, the tank dodges to the left while the rest of the party dodges to the right, ensuring no one eats the cleave Zurvan's going to hit the tank with immediately after. After Southern Cross, Zurvan will do one of 3 attacks at random. If he uses Psy Circle, which is a donut AoE, stand near Zurvan to avoid it. If he uses Tail End, which is a large point-blank AoE knockback, move away from Zurvan to avoid it. Keep in mind, if you're really late to notice Tail End, it may be better to just eat it, because if you're hit by it while trying to run away from it, there's a good chance you and the wall are about to become closer friends than you want to be. The final thing he can do here is repeat Biting Halberd, and if he's still above 60% at this point, he may even follow it up with another Southern Cross. I've heard reports that he can use a Tank Buster after his 3rd random attack as well, if the DPS doesn't have him below 60% yet, so prepare for that as well. Once he's done his 3rd attack and is under 60% HP, the add phase begins. Zurvan's add phase is almost identical to normal mode, with the addition of 1 new add and more enemies in each wave. Wave 1 spawns to the north and is made up of 1 Will and 4 Thew adds. It's possible to have 1 tank hold all the mobs in this and the other waves with good cooldown usage, but if you find you're having issues with this, split the adds up between the 2 tanks. Remember that the Will buffs its damage after being alive for a brief period, so prepare for the extra damage. Once Wave 1 is dead, a Wit will spawn to the east and begin casting meteors. You want to kill this Wit first and dodge the meteors he spawns around the arena. The new add to this phase, the While, also spawns to the south, which will start casting a gaze attack that causes people to run around uncontrollably for several seconds. Just make sure no one's looking in the direction of the Weil before you see the giant gaze AoE go off. After that, he just shoots fireballs at his current aggro target, so pick him up and kill him along with the 2 wills, which spawn on the west side of the arena. For wave 3, it's 1 wit to the west, 1 Weil to the north, 1 will to the south, and 3 thews to the east. Same order, wit first, then group everything else up at the Weil and kill it. Once this third wave is dealt with, Zurvan will unleash his ultimate attack. It causes a cutscene and stuns the entire party, so make sure that people are topped off and you use the usual mitigations before the stun and the cutscene trigger. After he dashes through a giant snowflake, you're on to the final phase. Zurvan's final phase, you absolutely want to start with everyone alive, as having any deaths in this phase can quickly snowball the mechanics out of control. The first thing Zurvan will do is mark all 8 players with either a fire or ice debuff. It will also tether you to one of the other players marked with the same debuff, meaning it's always 2 sets of 2 fire tethers and 2 sets of 2 ice tethers. Keep in mind that if any one person is dead, 1 set won't be there, which is very important for the mechanics later. Players with tethers must make sure they don't run too far away from each other, or they'll begin taking about 5k damage every half a second. The distance to trigger the damage is slightly larger than the diameter of Zurvan's hitbox, just outside of max melee range, so as long as you stay near Zurvan, you should be okay, even if tethered to the main tank. Keep in mind who gets what debuff and who you're tethered to is somewhat fixed, as this will matter for a mechanic coming later. After this, Zurvan will mark a player with a prey marker before firing a giant line AoE in their direction. We have this person move to one of the flanks and eat the AoE on their own, as it places a powerful bleed on any one hit that you can't remove. Zurvan then follows this up with Turfing, a multi-hit tank buster on the main tank, which you'll want to pop cooldowns for. Every time you see Turfing, it will hit 1 extra time, and the final hit is always a fire AoE around this target. After Turfing, Zurvan will cast Southern Cross. I've seen many parties handle this cross many different ways, but my favorite way to do it is almost exactly like phase 2. Everyone stacks, tank goes left, party goes right. We have our tank run through the boss to stack with everyone else when it starts casting, and then it looks just like it did back in phase 2. The person tethered to the main tank can actually run directly through the boss's hitbox if they want, just so they don't create too much distance. Just watch for Zurvan's cleave right after. Once the cross is done is where the real fun begins. Zurvan will use Broken Seal and randomly do one of 3 patterns of meteor markers around the arena. You'll want it so that people with the ice debuff stand under ice meteors, and people with fire debuffs stand under fire meteors. They also come in pairs, since you still can't wander too far from your tethered partner throughout all this. So for determining who stands where, we have a simple solution regardless of who gets what tethers, though players will either have to type where they want to go, or just wing the adjustments. Believe it or not, that's what I see mostly in the party finder. So here's a diagram of one of the 3 possible patterns of meteors that you can get. After Zurvan does Southern Cross and his cleave, you want to try and fan out and have your raid match the layout of this meteor setup. Like I said, wing it, call it out, but you have plenty of time after Zurvan cleaves, like 10 to 15 seconds, to get everyone in positions that match this. Now, if you get this meteor pattern, everyone's already where they belong, so you're good to go. Now, if you get one of the other 2 meteor patterns, it just requires a little bit of adjustment in order to get to the right spot. If you get this meteor pattern instead, which is just 2 crosses on both sides, everyone just backs off to the side that they're on's cross, since basically you could split the arena in half and everyone just moves to the closest cross that they're connected to. If you get this last pattern here, the northeast red tethers go east, the southwest red tethers go south, the northwest blue tethers go north, and the southeast blue tethers go west. There's plenty of time to get to your meteor spot, so don't worry about how far those last blue tethers have to run. Now, depending on which layout you get, Zurvan follows up the meteors with a different mechanic. If you get the pattern where they're all close to the center of the room, Zurvan will follow up with a tail end, so run away from him as soon as your meteor hits. If it's the pattern with the meteors all around the outside, Zurvan will use Psy Circle, so you have to get in close to him to avoid that. If you get the 2 cross pattern, Zurvan will follow up with a Biting Halberd, so you just need to get behind him once the meteor lands. It helps if the main tank is as far away as possible when eating their meteor, as the time it takes for Zurvan to get back to the middle of the room extends how long it takes for him to cast the ability, giving the raid more time to adjust. He'll do a cleave after the meteor mechanic and then cast another set of tethers and repeat what he just did for the first set. After the second set of meteors, Zurvan will do Soar again, which acts exactly like it did back in Phase 2. After Soar, Zurvan will cast Demon's Claw on the main tank, knocking them back really far, stunning them, and giving them magic vulnerability up. If Zurvan is dead center in the room and the tank is as close as possible to the center of his hitbox, you won't be knocked into the wall of fire. After being knocked back, Zurvan will begin casting Wave Cannon on the main tank, a line AoE that's damage can be split by players standing inside of it. The first player hit takes significantly increased damage, so you'll want the off tank to pop a cooldown and be the person closest to the boss for this, while everyone else stands between the off tank and the main tank. The preferred method I see most people go with here is to use a Dark Knight and have them use Living Dead in order to completely solo the damage from the mechanic and just heal them up to full before they are fully killed off by the ability's effects. Some groups even prefer to just let the main tank die here. If you have an off tank, you just let the off tank take over. If you're going to do that, you better be sure you're going to kill him soon, because Zurvan's going to do another Tether and Meteor set, and if you don't have that set by the time the meteors hit, well, that's going to be bad for your team. Honestly, worst case scenario, if you're afraid of people dying to any mechanic in this fight, use the tank LB to help survive it. I've seen it work for Soar, I've seen it work for the meteors. It is definitely a good option in this fight, so keep it as something in reserve. If you don't kill Zurvan before the end of the third meteor set, he will begin using a new rotation that eventually repeats from the first meteor set. Expect a Biting Halberd into a Demon's Claw / Wave Cannon, into new tethers, into a Wave Cannon, according to what I've read through the community. Overall, this fight isn't too bad, it's just about memorizing the possible patterns for Soar and tethers, and the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. The more DPS you have here, the less mechanics you have to do. That should be self-explanatory, but especially with that first 75% mark, it definitely helps with the rest of the fight. But if you can't persevere through that, it is repeatable, it is predictable, and you can do it with lower DPS. Thank you for watching my guide to Zurvan Extreme. If you're looking for information regarding the way to do it with different party setups and whatnot, I do have a document that has all of his ability rotations that will be included, and I'll do my best to add some sort of description for non-standard comps. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for more guides and information leading up to the expansion of Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood. I'll see you all next time, and until then, take care.